And it's time for us to have that conversation, the all too uncomfortable conversation that many of us did not expect to be here on March 7th, but here we are. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast on a Thursday. Alongside my partners, as always, Derek Bodner, Kyle Neubeck, I'm Devon Givens. Brianna's producing. All of you, as always, in the chat. Hope you told a friend to tell the other friend and the other friend to join on in to the conversation, and it's going to be maybe
Are you sure you want to channel Tobias Harris to open the show?
Uncomfortable conversation. I do it better. I say it better than Tobias Harris, and I show up. How about that? So we have a lot to talk about this one today.
You do now.
Well, now.
3 months later.
When I was supposed to. I clock in. I'm here. And we are here.
You were getting a paycheck without showing up. You know what? Tell a friend to tell a friend.
Tell a friend to tell a friend. Okay. Tell a friend to tell a friend. No, I wasn't. I didn't. I wish I was, but no, I wasn't. But here we are. And now I am getting paid. And I'm happy to be doing so with that. And that's why I got the ding from Kyle early in the show. But we have plenty to get into here. Looking at the schedule, as we've done for so many weeks now, especially when Joel Embiid started to miss those games, other missed games piling up, from Robert Covington to DeAnthony Melton, Nick Batum, and so many others. And now we are here where we have to talk about where the Sixers may potentially fall in the East standings and the playoff picture. We were talking about top three for so long. Now they're trying to stay out of the bottom three of the play-in tournament. So we'll get to that. We'll get to a few other things as the show goes along. But Kyle, when we look at things right now, the Sixers are currently, after losing these last two games, we talked so much about that big win against Dallas, how important it was to play Brooklyn and Memphis, taking at least one of those two following that.
Hopefully both.
Yeah, hopefully
at least
both.
One.
But taking one is specifically following the win, get the one directly after against Brooklyn. That said, because Orlando has won 5 games in a row, they are 37-26 right now. They are a game and a half up on the Sixers. New York, they were rolling at a time. They have started to backslide a bit in the standings because of the injuries to all of the players, that Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, now Jalen Brunson injured as well. Isaiah Hartenstein dealing with some injuries there too. Dealing with problems there. They're starting to backslide. Can the Sixers move up? You know you had to pay attention to the Miami Heat. Indiana falling a little bit. But the Sixers now at 35-27, folks, are 7th in the East. They are right there at the top of the play-in, a half a game up on the Indiana Pacers for the 8th seed, half game back of Miami for the 6th spot, and 1 full game back of New York in that 5th seed, who they will play on Sunday and Tuesday as part of that home-home series there in New York. Kyle, we're here right now where we look at this basketball team, where it looks like, as we look at this basketball team and what they've been doing, the backslide is real. And it may continue, especially with as much as we've talked about the schedule that's upcoming with the tough opponents that they have in front of them.
Yeah, so before we even get to any schedule-related stuff, I just want to lay out where they are since Joel Embiid went down. So these are numbers from February 1st onward. It was actually very convenient. Joel went down January 30th, so new month, new team. And
as we all know, the most important thing is to make Kyle's
easy statistical markers.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely.
So since February 1st, the Sixers are the 29th defense in the NBA. Utah is the only team that's worse. So they're worse on defense than the Pistons, the Wizards, the Blazers, who, again, the Blazers were bad to begin with, and they're also all hurt right now. So to be worse than them in that time period, that's quite an accomplishment. 29th on defense, and we've hammered them for the defense. I think it's safe to say all of us are skeptical that they can cobble together a competent defense without Joel Embiid available. On the other side of the ball, they are 19th in offense, which I would say is probably overachieving a little bit just based on guys being in and out of the lineup. But the underlying numbers there are bad. So they're 26th in effective field goal percentage. And for those of you who don't know what that means, essentially effective field goal percentage just weights 3-point shots more than 2-point shots. And so what that tells you is that they're not making and taking enough threes. And so under that banner, you would say, okay, they're 19th in offense. That's been able to steal them some wins here and there. But the underlying numbers suggest that they're probably worse than that. And they're probably going to be worse in the weeks ahead on offense, simply because it is hard to build a sustainable, high level, even like baseline average offense in the NBA if you don't take and make enough threes. And there are a million reasons for that. Tobias Harris is one of them, but it's a team effort. Like, they got to get up more threes. They got to make more threes. They're bottom 10 in assist percentage, bottom 5 in assist ratio, 25th in net rating, and they're 20th in pace. And if I'm looking somewhere, the two places, and I've said this on the show in different ways, the two places I think they immediately need to change if they want to try to pull out of this. They have to play faster. They cannot be a bottom 10 team in pace. Like, it's one thing to do that last season when it's James Harden and Joel Embiid. It's even one thing this year when James leaves and it's more the Maxey show, but it's still Joel Embiid. You cannot be bottom 10 in pace with this personnel and their inability to score in the half court. Like, that's a big problem. And you have to shoot more threes. I don't care how they have to do it. If you have to go to Tobias and say, look, we're going to run you in pick and rolls and you have to be a pull-up shooter. Like, we all know his issues as a catch-and-shoot guy. He's reluctant there. If you have to say to him, we will give you the ball 5 more times a game and I need you to shoot threes on 3 or 4 of those, then do that, because the three-point volume has to come. And so that is the profile of a team that has no path to being good. You can't get stops. You're below average on offense and arguably are underachieving based on where your shots are coming from and who's taking them. That's a bad basketball team. And so, like, as much as we say, like, yes, they beat Dallas, they got to come into Brooklyn or against Memphis and get one of those two. The numbers would suggest to you they should not be favored outright against basically any team in the league right now. And that's with or without Tyrese Maxey. Maxey, I think, makes a difference, certainly. I think if he plays in games like Brooklyn or Memphis, they probably win at least one of those two, if not both of those. But nothing is a gimme right now. And so, as we're saying, like, we were arguing about different points in the season. Who would you want to play in the playoffs? Who they match up with? Things like that. They just got to hope they stabilize enough that they're not in the 8th seed by the time the season ends and playing on the road to try to avoid Boston in round 1. Like, that's where they're at right now.
Yeah. And you brought up getting out in transition, because I was looking at some of those stats before the show too. Do you know how many points per possession they score, or points per 100 they score in the half court since February 1st?
It's going to be ugly.
It is abysmal. 90.8 points per 100 possessions.
And what would the average be? Just for people to, or off the top of your head, what's
102.
good?
102 would be the median.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you're 12 points per 100 possessions lower than the median average, the only teams that are worse, Memphis, who they just played, and that's barely worse.
Who has the worst offense in the league.
Worst offense in the league, and most of their players that you would know are out. And Houston. Only teams in the league over that span who are worse in the half court. They are 21st overall in offense. According to Clean and Glass, their numbers are going to be slightly different because of how they define a possession. Doesn't matter, and garbage time doesn't matter. 21st in overall offense, 28th in half court offense. They definitely need to run more. That's 100% true. Not only because it will get them some higher value shots, but it will also, that's a way to get them threes that Kyle was talking about. To get out there on the break, get Buddy free, because when you're in the half court, there's just no reason for Buddy's defender to leave him. That's true for a number of players, even Tobias when he is playing well, which occasionally does happen, although not nearly as much as you would want it to. It is because he's getting early offense, either an open three or against an unset defense or a mismatch. He just doesn't do much in the half court anymore. I don't know what happened. That's a much broader conversation. But one way to get him going and get a better version of Tobias is to get out on the break. Unfortunately, in order to get out on the break, you'd usually have to get a stop. And as you mentioned, they are also not only an abysmal half-court offense, they are terrible defensively.
And then you have to get the rebound, too, when you do get the stop, to allow yourself to get out there and transition.
Other than that...
other than that, because...
Weirdly enough, their rebounding numbers are better than... I mean, they're still... I think they're probably bottom 10 or like bottom 12 at best, I would say. But that... Hey, great. You're like, at best, you're 18th in a category. Like, congratulations.
Yeah.
Gene Ross says, so are they bad? Yeah.
Legitimately, the only thing they do well offensively right now, they don't turn it over. They actually have the fewest turnovers in the league over that span.
Yeah, and they have to. And as you guys were running those numbers off, and look, you mentioned some of the teams where they were jumbled up there with, in the mix with. When you say Memphis, we know how bad they are. Portland, the Portland Trailblazers, when we look 20th and 22nd and 26th and the 90, of course, with the offensive rating since fair, that's insane to think about the Philadelphia 76ers, wherever you've projected them to be at the end of the year, and getting into the mix of the championship conversation. Never did we think when we got here in the spring that we would be talking about the rankings that they are currently in with these really bad basketball teams that we know had no shot of doing anything. Now, yes, the injuries are there, so we understand why they are here. But to see it, witness it in real time, to see how they have lost some of these games, to see the injuries as of late with the concussion, mild concussion, and missing the 2 games from Tyrese Maxey, but also seeing even before that where they did blow a couple of games, not just the Brooklyn and Memphis games this week, even in the past when Maxey was out there and we were like, oh, they needed to take that one because of the 8 to 10 that Derek would talk about, that you needed to steal to make sure that you still got into that mid-40s when it comes to positioning yourselves for that 6 seed. We always talked about the 6 seed, and now we are here looking, mentioning the 8 seed to try to avoid Boston, or the 7 seed to make sure you face off against the Milwaukee Bucks or the Cleveland Cavaliers in that second round. And not to mention, when you're in the 7th, as Derek and I talked a little bit about last night, Kyle, you only have to win one game. You win the one, you're good. As far as the rules go, you're 7 seed, you win, you're in. If you lose, you still have a chance as that 8 seed to maybe try to get that second game to take that 8 seed. You need to win just that one game so you don't have to tax yourself even more, and then maybe stay away from Boston. So to have them right now in the conversation with Detroit and Portland and Memphis, that's really, really bad with where we are. And that's just showing how the bottom has fallen out for this basketball team.
And to your point, when I mentioned they need to win 8 to 10 out of these 23, that number has gone up because Miami has won 8 of their last 10. Miami has turned it around a little bit, put a little pressure on them.
Orlando also winners of 5 in a row. Like these teams that we were thinking, hey, they're below them.
Right. You might end up having to win 12 or 13 to maintain the top 6. And I don't know if you've been watching the same team, but that's going to be tough to scratch those out.
Here's another thing that I want to make sure people understand. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here. These aren't the people who need to hear this. There should be an understanding now of how valuable Joel Embiid is to a basketball team. Like, it's easy to say in December when they have this easy schedule and they're beating up on the Pistons and the Wizards and these also ran teams that nobody really cares about, and he's only playing 3 quarters. It's like, well, who cares? He's got to do it in April, May, and June. And I get that, right? We all sit here on the show, talk about it all the time. Joel's got to perform in the playoffs. That's where his legacy as a player will ultimately be decided. But Joel turned this team that cannot beat a hospital Grizzlies team, that cannot beat a bad Brooklyn Nets team, and he made them a contender just by being on the floor. Like, they had splits that were like, they're a top 5 offense and defense, or they're very close. It was like they're 2nd and 6th in the league and on both sides of the ball. That is the difference that Joel makes. That is like a 18 position leap on offense and something like a 25 spot jump on defense. That's how good he is at basketball. That's how much of a difference that he makes to a team. We are not talking about, oh, hey, they were just like chugging along. They were slightly above average. When Joel was healthy, they were up there with any team in the league. And we can pick apart the resume and be skeptical of whether he can get it done and say, well, they beat Boston once and Boston's still better than them. And do you trust them to beat a Dame Lillard and Giannis team in the playoffs? And so on and so on and so on and so on. But all the people who want to pick apart the regular season stuff, you are seeing now why that's so stupid. Like, this guy is the difference between relevance, between beating teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Boston Celtics at home early in the season, the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have been one of the best teams in the league the entire year.
The Denver Nuggets.
The Denver Nuggets on national TV. Like, they're beating these teams, and in many cases, beating them convincingly. Like, that Thunder game got close at the end. That was a game they led basically wire to wire. The Minnesota game, That was a pretty comfortable win with Joel picking them apart. The Denver game is back and forth, but they pull away in the end. There is nothing fluky about what they did because they have one of the most dominant players in basketball. And so I want people to understand maybe this season ends in failure again for the Sixers, and maybe Joel doesn't get it down, or maybe Joel is hurt, and there will be a contingent of people, including Vince, our colleague here at PHLY, who will be like, they should trade him, they should move him, they should do this. The second that guy leaves, you are no longer relevant as a basketball team and a basketball city until you get a player around or at his caliber. And that is the toughest thing to do in the sport. And I just want to make sure people understand that.
To your point, I mentioned the 90.8 points per 100 they've scored in the half court since February 1st. With Joel Embiid on the floor, that jumps to 105. Legitimately, you go from the 28th ranked half-court offense to the 5th ranked half-court offense by his present. That is better than the Los Angeles Clippers. And Clippers have been playing great basketball. They have 3 future Hall of Famers. Incredible team. And they're actually fitting much better than I think most people expected. You still had a better half-court offense than them with Joel Embiid on the floor. Without him, they have been just completely unwatchable. Completely.
Last time in Golden State game, of course, was the last game that he played when he was injured, January 30th on the road. That was the second to last game of that 5-game trip. The only game that they won, of course, was the Maxey 51-point performance against the Utah Jazz. But Embiid played in that Golden State game, but he really didn't play. The last game was Indiana, January 25th, where he had 31. Paul Reed had 30 against Denver, and then he did not play against Portland, came back on the floor for Golden State. So he's really been out since, because we just don't really count that Golden State game for anything because he wasn't
very clearly compromised that whole game.
So his last game was really January 25th. Before that, January 25th game, they beat the San Antonio Spurs to improve to 29-13. Right now, the Philadelphia 76ers are 35-27 at this stage. And so they have only won 6 games since that time. His last time on the floor, of course, being the Golden State game. But like we mentioned, it was really that Indiana game where he was himself. So to your point about his importance, really important. Then you add in the most improved, the leading candidate right now for the most improved player, he's missing games. So the both of them, their value to this basketball team, and we look at the squad where I just saw, whether we like what he says or not, Money Mark says in the next 15 games, they're going to go 2-13. But it's not because, yes, it's for what Mar is talking about, but it's also for why we talked about what they needed to do with this schedule, because it's going to be very difficult. And now we're looking at, man, they're only 15 games with the stretch that they have. They might win 2. They might win low single digits, maybe not even more than 5 games. That's crazy to think about. When we get back on the other side, we'll talk about who they really need to watch out for, the kind of target of staying right there in the mix of that play-in, but maybe moving is hopefully staying in that 7 to 8 seed.
So, guys, you get day-to-day annoyances. You also have the big annoyances, like trying to watch the Sixers without Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. I know you sit down at the end of a long day. Maybe you pay to go to a game, roll snake eyes, and it's a bad roster that night. It's easy to get worked up, but there is a better way. There's a chiller way when you go to the Wells Fargo Center, or you turn the PlayStation or the Xbox on in the middle of the game because that Sixers game was not working out. You can choose chill by reaching for an ice-cold Coors Light to help you out and get you through that, because with Coors Light, you know you're getting an ice-cold and chill beer because the mountains turn blue on the bottles and cans when they hit that perfect temperature. I'm not someone who is a stress drinker. I like to, it's warm weather. I'm on vacation. I'm at the beach. Every once in a while, though, end of a week where I'm sick of Derek's shit for whatever reason. We've been sniping at each other all week. I come home. I look in the refrigerator.
That never happens.
Yeah, we never bicker ever in person or on the show. But when I need something and I look in that refrigerator and I see those blue mountains in the fridge, they may be cold, but it warms my heart to know that I can come home to an ice cold beer. And Coors Light is cold layered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. It is mountain cold refreshment. So even though the state of Colorado continues to be mad at me, our good friends in Golden, Colorado, make sure that I can choose chill with a crisp and refreshing beer. So when you choose to rise it up above it all in your life, choose chill, choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company in beautiful Golden, Colorado.
And if you're looking for a place, you decided to stay home in your own place and watch the game with that cool beverage, and you want to call the place home, well, I have the right place for you if you're looking to find that new home for you to do just that. That's from our good friends at Mortgage CS. Yes, Mortgage CS offers refinancing options, including rate and term refinances for rate payment reduction or cash out refinances to tap into home equity, making it a smart choice for those with high interest debt or funding home projects and education. And look, I've been talking to my guys here about just different home things. I was talking to Kyle specifically about, hey, man,
buddy.
you know,
been a long last year.
Right? Yeah. And we were discussing, I was like thinking I might want something new. And I was talking to Vince. I was talking to Jamie Lynch about it as well. And it was great that Mortgage CS has been a part of this PHLY family now, because that might be something that I may look into as well. Why? Because, hey, Mortgage CS stands for Mortgage Concierge Service, right? White glove service. So they're going to make sure that they are there for your every need. They cater to your every need. Make sure they are there for you, whether it's looking for something in the very near future over the next couple of months, maybe by the summer, or long-term plan like Kyle and I were talking about, where maybe it might take me a little bit longer to find exactly what I need. They're an independent mortgage broker based right here in Philadelphia, giving the full control of the lenders that they work with, available 24/7. That's where the white glove service comes in. Mortgage CS is licensed coast to coast in many different states, and they don't forget, to spread the word to your families and friends out there. If you've done so yourself and you want to maybe help some people in the different states that you can do so, there are a ton of those that you can look into. They are there to educate and empower their clients, like maybe you, possibly me, or some others. Also there to help clients obtain ultra competitive rates. That's very, very important in this market right now, comparing rates between multiple lenders to find a deal that makes the most sense for you. The top priority for Mortgage CS is your financial big picture, not the bottom line. So they are there to provide exceptional customer service, 24/7 availability from the two owners, the great Alec and Ben, and tons of easy-to-use tools to make the mortgage process more approachable. So when you hear the word mortgage, think of Mortgage CS. Think of Ben and Alec. Save Ben's telephone number, 267-391-7425 to your phone. You can email Ben at ben@mortgagecs.com. Call, text Ben at any time of the day or night. Talk Philly sports, of course. Check out mortgagecs.com/PHLY to get started.
And if you want to call me, you can call 281-330-8004.
Yeah.
See how many people remember that.
Yeah, let's see how that one goes.
We did have, by the way, while we're on the Joel Embiid topic, there have been a lot of, and this is on social media as well as in our chat today, a lot of people asking, why haven't we gotten a Joel update? There was also, so Bill had a super chat. Afternoon, guys. So it's been 4 weeks since yesterday. No update on Embiid. Do you think no news is bad news? Any idea when we'll get an update? We also, of course, have our friendly neighborhood doom and gloom spokesman, Money Marr, throughout the chat, who thinks Joel's never returning and it's all a big conspiracy. And I don't know.
You don't got to give the troll attention. Come on now.
Money Marr is not a troll.
Oh,
he's
my
a
God.
loyal listener. He's a loyal listener.
No, he's a loyal troll, of course. Yes.
I would say this. One, no, I don't know why they haven't given an update. But two, I don't think that it's bad news.
No.
We haven't gotten an update. We've gotten pretty consistent communication on Joel, whether it's been through other reporters, whether it's talking to Joel directly. Like, I think the fact that Joel was made available and spoke to us publicly is a lot more notable than like, hey, we're putting out a press release, like he's going to be reevaluated in 3 more weeks. Like, that's a much bigger deal.
I think, and look, I understand skepticism around this topic. We have been burned in the past. You don't got to remind me. But if they say he will be reevaluated in approximately 4 weeks and you get the 4 weeks and a day and there's no official press release, it doesn't mean it's time to panic. To Kyle's point, the fact that he was put out in front of the media and spoke about it at length is a much bigger indication than it going 29 days instead of 28 days without an update. Yeah. We're all on edge. It's 100% notable why, but not every, you don't have to read into every little thing. It's okay.
Also, February was the shortest month, so even with the leap day, they could, if they really wanted to get technical nitpicky with it, they could be like, "Hey, look, it hasn't been 30 whatever days." Like,
that's not a real day. Don't count that.
So,
at what point though do you look at whenever you get the update? Let's say we get the update over the next week, but the team continues to just nosedive in the standings. Where you guys, if you were saying, "Hey, we are here. It doesn't make sense for you to come back." At what point do you do that? If you do that at all.
I mean, listen, the only way you could say Joel isn't coming back, or like go to Joel and say you're not coming back, which frankly, I don't think he would accept. They would literally have to lose like every game the rest of the way and be out of the play-in entirely.
Yes. That means falling below 10.
Yeah. There is no way you're going to look Joel Embiid in the eye and say, we have a chance to make the playoffs. And with you, like, as I lay out all those stats for, hey, they were second in or first in offense and fifth in defense, like whatever it was, you can't lay all that stuff out. And Joel knows that as well as anybody, right? He reads, whether that's Twitter, articles, he watches all the talking heads on TV. Like, he consumes basketball all the time. You are not going to him and saying, hey, you are having your best ever season and you were one of the best teams in the league with you on the floor, but you're not coming back so we can have the 17th pick in the draft or whatever. Like, you are not selling him on that. And we had another question in the chat at some point. I don't know who it was that said, would you rather get the 7 or 8 seed or get mid or not even a lot, like a late lotto pick? 100% make the playoffs and go for it. Like, you only have so many opportunities with this guy to continue playing. Like,
and he knows that too.
Yes.
He's very cognizant of that. Yes.
Joel said when he was talking recently, like,
he'll joke and be like, I only have 20 of these. But he knows the reality.
All right, so with that, you mentioned that. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say a quick, because I think there might be some people who don't really know the play-in rules because the Sixers haven't been in this field before. So the play-in basically determines the 7th and 8th seeds of the playoffs. It's for the 7th to 10th ranked teams. 7 and 8 play each other. The winner automatically becomes a 7th seed. The loser, 9 and 10 then play each other, and the winner of that goes on to play the loser of 7 and 8 for that 8th seed in the playoffs. The loser of the 9 and 10 game is disqualified from the playoffs. So basically, if you finish 7 or 8th, you just have to win one of the 2 games to make the playoffs.
Against bad teams.
Right, against bad teams, which doesn't... Anyway, but if you're in the 9 or 10 block, not only do you have a guaranteed, even if you win both games, you're guaranteed to play the Celtics, but you have to win 2 games in a row to qualify for the playoffs. It's much more difficult, and it's also, the outcome of having to play Boston in the first round is much more devastating. You really want to make sure you end up in that 7 and 8 seed. But Kyle brought up the only way that Embiid's not coming back is if they don't make the top 10. Well, do you know who is 11th right now? Devon has a pretty intimate idea who it is.
Brooklyn, right?
Not a great team right now.
Right.
Newsflash. And they are currently 10 games up on the Brooklyn Nets in the standings. They are not missing the top 10 in the playoffs. Joel Embiid, unless there's a setback, is coming back.
All right, so that leads me to add on to that. Kyle, throw it to you. Who should they be watching for then? Brooklyn is 11th, and they right now are 10 games back, as Derek just said, behind the 76ers. So with the 20 games left on the season right now, who should they be paying attention to in that bottom part? If we're not focused on the top 6, who should be worried about right there between 7, 8, 9, 10, and maybe even 11?
Well, I'll go a step further than Derek. You know who's in 10th? The Hawks, and Trae Young is out injured for a while. Like that's a team that basically is packed it in for the season. So
and even that, like, Chicago is currently 9th, and the Sixers are 5 games up on Chicago.
Yeah.
Like, they're not. Oh, okay, I'm not going to go too far. It would be very unlikely for them to fall that far in the standings.
Yeah, so, like, I think Chicago you have to at least look at based on where the Sixers are at. Now, Chicago, I always say this, and I will preface it with this statement. you can't just go through any team schedule from March 1st onward and say, okay, this team is better, they're going to win this game. Because March and early April, that last stretch of the season, is by far the weirdest part of the NBA schedule because everybody's juggling different priorities, right? Like, so a team like Phoenix, for example, that on paper, that's a really talented team, even if they're lower in the standings, but their night-to-night priority is just getting healthy. And so, like, they're not going to overtax Bradley Beal when he's available. Devin Booker's dealing with some stuff right now, so they're going to be cautious with him. You really don't know what version of them you're getting every night. So if a team has Phoenix on the schedule, and the Sixers actually have to go out to Phoenix, I believe, on that West Coast road trip, that's not automatically like if they were whole for that game, if Joel Embiid was somehow ready by March 20th, I would take the Sixers on the road against that team based on several factors. But that's kind of the hard part of saying Chicago's got a reasonably hard schedule, but Boston might let a game slip against them, like the Clippers could let a game slip. Minnesota, they're playing in late March, they just lost Karl Anthony Towns, or we presume they're going to lose Karl Anthony Towns for at least the rest of the regular season if he goes through rest and rehab to get right. So the Knicks right now, for example, on the Sixers schedule, the Knicks team that the Sixers are playing right now is not the Knicks team that was like the toast of the league for all of
9
January,
games in a row,
right?
yeah.
Like, that's not who you're up against. And so it's hard to go through and say, no, this is a loss, this is a loss, this is a loss. The problem for the Sixers is that you could go to every game and be like, this is a potential loss. And so Chicago, you have to watch at 9. I would be pretty surprised, to Derek's point, if they're somehow able to overtake the Sixers with a 5-game cushion in the loss column. It really is just a matter to me of, do you stay in front of Indiana, who they're only a loss behind the Sixers right now? But Indiana has been kind of a mess. Like, they have not been anywhere near as good in the second half of the season as they were to open the year for various reasons. Halliburton's been in and out of the lineup. They've changed things. Siakam's there. They're figuring things out. But if they can somehow stave off the Pacers, you're not sitting pretty, but having a 7-8 game at home against Indiana for the right to play Doc Rivers in round 1 would be pretty appetizing, I would say.
And I just want to say, like, when we talk about holding teams off, there's 20 games left overall. If we talk about Joel Embiid maybe returning back on April 1st, which would be a pretty conservative 7-week sort of timeline, you're only talking about 13 more games. Yeah. So when you're talking about like a team like Chicago making up 5 games over a 20-game span, you're hoping to get Embiid back for, let's say, 5 to 7 of those. You don't have to tread water. You just have to have some base level of pick up 3 of these 13, and you have a real solid chance of staying in the top 8.
Man, look at that.
But like, people are bringing up like, hey, well, right now Brooklyn is a better team than the Sixers without Embiid and Maxey. Okay, but they're not making up 10 games with 20 games left. Yes, and also there's only 20 games left in the season. Probably only 13 or so of them left without Embiid. And I think that's why this conversation becomes a lot easier if we do get that Embiid update and we can say, all right, well, he's going to pick up basketball activities in a week, in 2 weeks, what have you. Yeah. We can have easier projections to make here, but right now with so much uncertainty, it just leads to a lot of doom and gloom. They should still keep a top 8 seed.
Yeah, and look, Tyrese also helps. Right, not having him in the concussion protocol matters.
He can steal you a game or 2 or 3 or 4, absolutely. And thinking about the prospects of Indiana in a play-in situation, 7 and 8, after watching them, of course, when they played the Sixers, beating them twice already this season, twice out of the 3 times that they played, and running up and down the floor on the floor with them, that would be something. We saw them in the midseason tournament that they had, and how they played in that. Totally different time frame. Buddy Hield no longer on the team. Yes, Siakam is there, and so on when it comes to that basketball team. But that will be something to watch them potentially have to play Indiana up and down pace that we talk about in a play-in situation. That certainly would be. All right, we have one more thing that we might want to get into around the league a little bit for our final conversation.
But before that, got to tell you about our wonderful friends at Bagels and Co, who offer huge Brooklyn-style bagels.
I'm hungry.
made right here in Philadelphia. I eat bagels several days a week. And Bagels and Co. offers a wonderful variety. So you make sure, even if you are someone like me who is obsessed with bagels, you can get different ones every single week. They got themed bagels all year. Got multiple holidays coming up. St. Patrick's Day, you get a green bagel. Easter, I don't know, maybe like an egg theme there. Maybe even like a peep flavor. We were talking about peeps the other day. That's going to be an Easter Sunday or Easter lead-in topic, I think. If you're a cream cheese guy or gal, I certainly am. They offer 30 different flavors of cream cheese. They rotate all throughout the seasons, throughout the year. They have themed cream cheeses for all the local sports teams, Eagles, Flyers, Sixers, Phillies, and perhaps even the Union. Maybe the Union will be the next team everyone latches their hope onto after the Sixers season has gone haywire. And as important as that variety in cream cheese and bagels is the affordability. When you go to Bagels and Co., they keep their prices down. They're fighting inflation just like the rest of us because they want you to be an everyday customer, not just someone who comes in for a weekend splurge. They even offer premium coffee, and you get that at a superior price to most national brands and chains. I think that's fantastic. So for the best Brooklyn-style bagels made right here in Philadelphia, head to www.thebagelsandco.com/store-locator to find the closest Bagels & Co. near you.
And look, I know right now the team is a tough watch. Trust me, I get it. We watch every game. But the playoffs are coming around. Joel Embiid, we think, will return. Tyrese Maxey, we're even more confident will return. You are going to, once we get the playoff basketball, you are going to want to be there, and Game Time is your place to go. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. You have injuries to worry about with that. Tickets, not so much. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. We will have that off-season theater run with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best. You're not getting out of that, Devon.
I'll be there. With
killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. With Game Time, you get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive, and you can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps and you're set. With tickets sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee.
And remember, folks, by the way, tomorrow the Sixers play the New Orleans Pelicans, so we'll have our post-game show tomorrow night right here. As always, following the game, we'll be here breaking it all down, and hopefully Tyrese Maxey is good to go. Hopefully he's able to play. And the Pelicans right now are 5th in the Western Conference standings, and they have won their last 2 games. So we'll see what they look like coming in here at 37-25 against the Sixers. Should be an interesting one. Zion has been available. Brandon Ingram has been playing. C.J. McCollum. So good basketball team. It's going to be a tough one. Start off that really tough stretch for the Philadelphia 76ers against a Western Conference opponent there in the New Orleans Pelicans. All right, we talk a lot about the offseason as well. First, it was more about the trade deadline and what they could do, what they should do, and that would also spearhead the conversation of the offseason. And one of the names that is still available as one of those marquee names, All-Star.
Might be the only marquee name.
Only marquee name and an All-Star this year, and we've kind of ignored it.
Tobias Harris is available.
That's true. That is true. He is a marquee name. He's going to get a lot of money.
I hope our audio-only listeners can understand the head shake.
The one guy, though, that we talked about and we thought it was a foregone conclusion, maybe it still is, Paul George, staying in Los Angeles. Kawhi Leonard re-signed already. We know about Siakam and Anunoby being traded. Look like they'll probably stay in their new homes. Right now, with Paul George, though, Kyle and I were talking about it, Derek as well, where it looks like the guy hasn't been playing all that great for the Los Angeles Clippers. 40-21 right now. They're 2.5 games out of first place. but he in particular has not been as good as he was to earn that All-Star berth.
So I've been paying attention quite a bit to the Clippers for various reasons. And I think people should do a little digging on, if you look at Paul George's numbers from the moment that Kawhi signed his extension until now, they are not very good. And I've heard some various things over the last couple months. And I would say this. I think one of the toughest decisions of this entire offseason is going to be whatever the hell the Clippers do. And then by extension, how the Sixers potentially respond to what the Clippers do with Paul George. Because my understanding, having talked to people around the league, is that when Kawhi signed that extension, that was kind of the Clippers set their ceiling of like, okay, Kawhi's getting this. He's the top of our market for our guys that we have. And I don't think Paul George wants to be like I'm taking even more of a discount than that guy. Yeah. I think Paul George, knowing that this is his last opportunity potentially to get a big contract, looks at it and says, I want max money. I want as much as I can get. I don't know that the Clippers are going to give that to him. And right now, I think when Kawhi signed it, the assumption that was made and reported around the league was like, oh, the Paul George will be worked out soon. And the longer this goes on, the more that says to me and people around the league, I don't know if they're going to agree on an extension. And I don't know if Paul George is going to end up sticking there. And so it's a multifaceted thing. One, does Steve Ballmer, who's got more money than God, eventually just say like, well, fuck it, we're going to give him the money. Yep. And then basically the only thing that you'd have to deal with then, other than the luxury tax concerns, which are real, is I'd say managing Kawhi and saying to him like, hey, you took a cut as the best guy on the team, and now Paul's getting this, like making sure that that's okay. But also, are you paying Paul George too much money? And that would be the question for the Sixers, because for now approaching like 2 months of this season, Paul George has been a high volume, below average 3-point shooter and has been a guy that fades in and out of games. And I know it's easy to just like, you look at his basketball reference page as a Sixers fan or another fan and say, well, he's shooting 8 threes a game for the season and making 38%. But when you're making, he's going to command $50 million a year in the offseason, I think it's worth noting that if he comes in as the number 3 guy, you might not be as satisfied with the Paul George experience as you might think you would be if you don't watch him night to night. Because I've been following that team closely, both watching them myself, reading coverage of them, interacting with fans of the Clippers, and just something to keep in mind because he's the big name on the board right now.
No, to your point, after the Sixers did what they did at the deadline, they have all these draft picks. You start talking to people around the league about who can they trade for, who can they sign. Paul George moving, not necessarily the Sixers specifically, but just moving in the summer is certainly something where it was not summarily dismissed as much as I thought it would be. And that, again, that's not meant to get your hopes up. It's just surprising to me that this has played out the way it is, and I think others around the league have come to that sort of same conclusion. To your point, he's shooting 33% from three-point range over his last 18 games, basically since mid-January. He has been pretty ineffective in that role. You don't know whether or not that's a Kawhi contract. You don't know whether or not that is getting the ball taken out of his hands a little bit.
It could just be random.
Could just be random. We thought that Paul George would be an easier one because Kawhi he's not really a catch-and-shoot guy. He wants to create his own jump shot. Paul George can play that catch-and-shoot game better, at least historically he has. He has not necessarily fit in as well as you would have expected. And he is, he's 33. He will be 34 when he signs that next contract. You are paying for the 34 through 37-year seasons of his career. That's typically not the market you want to be in. The last 2 years are probably going to be a disastrous contract.
And a guy who's had several major
barely
injuries.
Plays 50 games per year every year. There are a lot of risks. Is the upside for the next 2 years worth the downside? After that, it will be a conversation that we will have, I think, in the offseason, because I don't think there is going to be a Paul George has come to terms anytime soon.
Well, when we talk about just different types of players who can do certain things, they haven't had that type of guy in that body type, 6'6", 6'7", to do that for what he does. And especially when you look at right now, sure, you can go back to the Jimmy Butler piece, but they still do it differently and finding ways to get their points on the board. But the question always comes to, okay, if it's Philadelphia, yes, you have Kawhi Leonard, Paul George is your first two, James Harden certainly getting you the basketball and the surrounding pieces. But we always talk about the big fella. How does it work off of the big fella? How does a player like that then work off Joel Embiid? And does he get easier shots because of that player? Does Tyrese Maxey in a different role now, again, improving his point guard play, but also being able to score with James Harden used to be that, not scoring as much, but still being that playmaker. Does that help that player out in Paul George? So I still think it'll be enticing for a lot of Sixer fans because they look at the name, number one, he's available. You know the cap space that you now have created.
Paul George, the best version of Paul George, is a great
and a very versatile player who can dominate on both sides of the floor and fit in a number of roles.
So it's still going to be something that's really intriguing for Sixer fans if he does, in fact, not sign an extension by that time. We're going to be having that conversation with a lot of Sixer fans about what they will. And there will be some that say, I don't care, it's not my money. What am I worried about? So the next 2 years, can we, as they would talk about their basketball team, can we win a championship within those 2 years where you just eat whatever the contract is on the back end and you worry about that later because you have an opportunity to win the championship. You have somebody who can now maybe not to the same level as the defense that it used to be, but matches up against Jason Tatum in the postseason and matches up against some of those other wings that you're going to have in the Eastern Conference in the postseason. So I think a lot of people will, even with that money being as high as it is, talk themselves into it because if they don't see another opportunity to trade for someone else that is even in that conversation, in that mold, they're going to want something right away to replace in that lineup, especially when Tobias Harris leaves and while he is the bigger name, you're not re-signing him.
And to that point, Hypothetical Man was in the chat bringing up a ZB, Zach Berm-ism, where you don't want to give A money to B players. And I think that's largely not been the case in the NBA for a number of reasons. One, to get a player in free agency, you have to give him A money. It's just sort of the nature of the way it is. Two, in the past, there's been no real downside to giving B money to A players outside of tradability because there wasn't a hard cap like there is in other sports. That's changed now. With the second apron and the new CBA, there's so much more. Kyle's point, it used to be Bodner could just be like, so what? I'll pay the tax. Yeah. No real downsides in terms of flexibility. Now there is. Now you get to the point where like you can't sign players. You can't aggregate salaries and trades. You can't get buyout guys because you're over the second apron. There's a lot more to it than there were in past iterations of the collective bargaining agreement. There are going to be a lot of teams making much tougher decisions than there were in the past. These, B players getting A contracts are going to be much more detrimental to building a championship caliber roster and not just 2 or 3 high-level players. It will be tougher. It's giving mid-30s players max money is much riskier than it ever has been.
And it would, in a lot of ways, it'd be funny if they actually got Paul George because he's a player that other front offices who ran this team tried to get. Like, he was on the Colangelo radar for sure. They kicked the tires when he was still in Indiana, I believe, trying to get him. And peak Paul George, when someone said in the chat, he's one of the streakiest stars in the NBA, maybe the streakiest star. And I think that's true. When he is really going, he is awesome to watch. Like high volume, high efficiency shooter, great switch defender, guy who can take somebody off the dribble, play make a little bit for others, is scalable because he can be an on-ball guy, but he's also a great off-ball guy. And you can put him on different types of assignments and run different lineups and do some awesome things stylistically because he's on your team. And then he goes through weeks at a time. Right now, it's really like a month plus that he's been in a bad way where it's like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, there's a reason why some people refer to him as playoff P in a good way, and some people refer to him as playoff P in a pejorative way. Like, he is all over the map. Somebody pointed out that Carmelo Anthony's son said that Paul George is his GOAT recently, which that was one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard. I think his mom tried to smack him over that and said, your dad is also like a Hall of Fame basketball player, number one. But I would be fascinated to see how Paul George is received in Philadelphia because he is the definition of a boom or bust star, and it's just kind of all over the place.
And again, I still sort of feel like the end result is he stays in LA, But
Same.
I think there's more uncertainty than there ever has been. And I think part of that is because, like I said, of the new collective bargaining agreement and that second apron restrictions.
In 2017, 2018, when the discussions of Paul George maybe leaving Indiana and Jimmy Butler leaving Chicago and eventually ending up in Minnesota for that short time, it was always Paul George for me because of his ability to score the way that he did and the versatility that we talk about, the athleticism that he had, and what would necessarily fit more long-term, what would be, especially, and when Jimmy Butler was coming from the Tom Thibodeau place there in Chicago, you're like, man, this guy's body's all worn down. Then he goes to Minnesota, same thing with Tom Thibodeau. What's his contract going to look like? And right now that's held up. So I was even wrong because I didn't think it was going to work out in that way, but Paul George was the one. He was the one.
His years in OKC after he made that move, I don't think people it played in OKC, so it's a classic. Like people forget.
Durant
people
leaves,
don't
it's
care.
him and Westbrook only.
He was one of the 5 best players in the league. He was 3rd in MVP voting. He scored 28 points a game, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, first team all defense, 3rd in defensive player of the year. Like that guy at his peak was a fucking dog. And unfortunately, health and various other reasons have not allowed him to be that guy. Like since that year, the most games he's played in a single season will be this year. But up before this year, he had played no more than 56 games since he left OKC. That's 4 seasons of 56 games or less. That's also, if you're talking about potential Sixer stuff, that's a problem. They need guys who can be available when Joel is not, and that has not been PG's MO.
How would that look? Let's forget about the money real fast. Just talking about the player. How would that look as a third guy?
That's a plug and play to me. Like I think
even with the
reason you would go after Paul
about.
George, and I look, as we've all said, they're definitely interested depending on what happens. If you believe in Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, Paul George is basically the perfect third guy. He's someone who can be the guy who steps up when you need him as the third guy, but is also a dangerous off-ball player, someone that you can put in actions with Joel Embiid at the elbows, on the wing, do all that. Like, perfect partner for Tyrese Maxey. You can go bigger. You can go smaller. It opens up a ton of different lineup combinations, but the ability to stay healthy, the shot streakiness, all that is the downside. I like, in terms of just peak fit, doesn't really get much better to me.
Yeah. No, it would but we're talking about a 34-year-old. We're not talking about peak. That introduces very significant risk. And quite frankly, even at 26, he was very injury prone. Yeah. Some of which devastatingly so. It is, look, I mostly fall on the side of when you have a chance to get somebody that good, you live with the risks. If there weren't risks, he wouldn't be available. That being said, like, that contract is going to, I mean, they're all going to be scary. Like, to your point, you brought up Jimmy Butler. I was terrified of that deal. Yeah. I was terrified in part because I didn't trust Jimmy to fit with.
The lesson here is that Derek is a very scared man.
Oh, that is 100% true.
But you know what? I had changed my tune watching him, even the way he was taking his time, and I was questioning, like, why is he not shooting the basketball and all that? But when we got to the second half of the season and you got to the postseason, it was like, okay, I understand. You traded for him, and I don't want to pay Tobias Harris. Yeah. So I was good with the Jimmy Butler piece. To your point at that time, but yeah, the Paul George thing was real.
I mean, I was worried about Jimmy aging. I was worried about Jimmy being happy with Ben Simmons long term. Where I eventually came down to, though, and what I was getting at, I eventually came down to the fact that he was going, like, I would have brought him back. And that's just because the talent is worth the risk. There's always going to be risk in these situations. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a chance of getting them. I will have to see how Paul George plays the rest of the season. Luckily, we have more time. But yeah, the 34-year-old thing with the injury history, not great. The one thing I don't worry too much about is the shooting. Like, the shooting slump, I think, is mostly noise. And I think it's part of the reason why we're having this conversation. If the Clippers are going to overreact to a shooting slump, then I am fine with that. I don't worry about that. I worry about health. I worry about whether or not he's still able to get to his spots off the dribble. I worry about his defense holding up. And I worry about how it's going to age over the next 4 years of the contract. The shooting, I worry much less about.
He's been a high-level shooter for like a decade. I completely agree with you there.
4 years of Paul George at the number you just talked about versus Tobias Harris, 4 years, $20 million.
Give me talent over.
Even at that number.
Yeah. I can't. Like, that would.
I'm just saying.
I wouldn't even think
4 years,
twice.
$100 million.
I wouldn't even think twice.
That would be my Joker moment. That's where I'm just.
Paul George suffered one of the most gruesome injuries I've ever seen and still came back a much better player than Tobias Harris has ever been in his life. So give me the talent.
100%. I just know we focus so much on how much he would make.
Plus, he's another podcast guy, you know?
But he'd be trying to battle us for clicks and stuff, and he wouldn't come on our podcast.
He's got a pretty good show. I'll give him that.
They bring Tobias Harris back at that kind of money. I'm going to need to make use of one of our new sponsors coming up that we're not ready to drop yet, but will be later on.
Well, on our way out, guys, I will say thank you, as always, to our very lively chat that somehow just turns into people yelling at Money Mar every single day. So shout out to Money Mar, our wonderful, persistent troll in the chat. Also, shout out to the hypothetical man, the bull RJ, Biz Help
What
You.
up, RJ?
Dave Doer, second round exit fan. Wow, that cuts deep. Jay of the Jungle.
Jay.
Randy Rubart. Khalil Wilson, even though Khalil was coming in hot like 3/4 of the way in saying, "What's with the headline? Watch the whole show, buddy, and you'll understand." I
Watch
promise
the team.
you.
Watch the standings.
I'm a Joel. I just watch the whole show. That's all I'm going to say. Chris B. I already said hypothetical man, but I'll say it again. We love you, buddy. We got Martian Lynch. We got Miles Johnson, Brian Knight, my guy Gavin.
What up, Gav?
Larry Jackson. Kyle Wright, another Kyle. I've been having to compete with
Kyle Lowry.
Kyle Lowry for
Yeah.
most important. Well, it's not competing. He's
How many
kicking
times,
my ass.
How many
most
times do you
important
want to say
in
Kyle
Sixers
Lowry
world.
and almost say Kyle Neubeck?
Well, I don't usually call Kyle by his last name too often, at least verbally. So not too often.
Okay.
But when I hear people say Kyle said this or Kyle did that, that's when I get confused.
We got Provolone John. We got Rick Morse.
What up, Rick?
We got a lot of listen.
Tobias
Harris
in the
as
chat,
well.
and he says, "I'll take 4 years at $20 million apiece." Of course you would.
Of course you would.
Of course you would.
Ethan Pano and Bree, who was our super chatter today?
Let's get to the super
It was our guy Bill, the human plant.
What up, Billy?
Love to see you as always. If you guys have not already, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can get notifications each and every time we go live. And if you hit the thumbs up button, then perhaps some ice cold Coors Lights with the blue cans will somehow appear in your refrigerator.
We didn't talk enough about George Costanza glasses today, man.
George Costanza, Malcolm X. We'll get into it another time.
We'll get to it another day.
Maybe a Friday show. Who knows? A Sunday show even. We'll be here Sunday.
An off-season
We will
show.
see you after the Pelicans game tomorrow night.
Yes,
everyone.
Aaron is in studio, my man.
Oh, Aaron.
The bell. It's here.
I didn't shout out Aaron. My bad. Goodbye, everyone. We'll catch you tomorrow.
We all silly like the mayor.